interviewing Taliban commanders was such, you're shitting in your pants, right? Like, you don't know what's going to happen because you've heard that these guys are really, really nasty characters. They probably are, but they're kind of on their best behavior for you, or maybe it's just normal behavior. I don't know.
Because you're Indian?
Yeah. And surprisingly, that was the case. There was absolutely no hatred towards India, even amongst the Taliban. Like, when I'd bring up Pakistan, they'd almost always go, because they hated Pakistan. And en route to Balkh, there was suddenly the army checkpoints ended and the Taliban checkpoints started.
What's the vibe generally?
For me, my memory is very lucid. I was on one hand, I was like holding my sphincter in. I was like absolutely sure I was going to shit my pants at any point. There's no real way to describe it. It's
S&M vacations.
Yeah. I guess it's one of those full-on BDSM moments,
Live
right?
BDSM.
The high from the pain kind of thing, or the high from the danger in this case kind of thing.
Abhijit Iyer-Mitra makes his debut on the Ranveer Show. It's his first out of many episodes that he's going to record with us. This is one of the most educated guests that I've had on the show. He's got a degree in international relations. He's experienced a ton of things over the course of his life, including what I find the most interesting, which is thrill-oriented tourism, dangerous tourism, dark tourism. That's what the 2 episodes with him are about. It's all about his experiences, his stories. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of geopolitics peppered in. This man's visited Afghanistan, Syria, North Korea, China. He has a lot to share. He has a lot to teach the world about these cultures. And honestly, when it comes to such teachings, you can only learn it through a podcast. Absolutely love the conversation with him. I'm sure you're going to love it. It's an epic episode. You're going to enjoy it. Abhijit Iyer-Mitra, how are you? Seduce us with your mind, Abhijit Iyer-Mitra. All we hear about you is that you're a super smart guy who has opinions on geopolitics, who has opinions on technology, and you seduce the internet with your mind. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And there's a big danger asking a gay guy to seduce people on TV. So it's like, I'm not even going to go there right now.
What's happening?
Chal raha hai. It's like, I'm in kind of that Zen zone kind of thing where, everything is going to clockwork and I don't have to do much to get additional stimuli or whatever. So it's like,
Other than your ferocious learning process.
Yeah. Look, learning is like, it's for me, learning is like breathing. If I feel I haven't learned something new every day, it's a day wasted. It's a day I'm never getting back. And, this is kind of why I kind of make a fool of myself and be a clown in public. It's kind of almost self-humiliation in a way, because unless you do that, when you start taking yourself very seriously, that's when learning ends. That's when you're like, oh, people should listen to my opinion. And it's not, I need to listen to other people.
Yeah.
I'm a big dick when it comes to who I listen to.
Sure.
Right. But how do you know who to listen to if you're not hearing everybody?
Okay. Every human being has a bunch of subjects that they are actually experts in. What are your subjects? Like for me, it's probably content creation, communication skills, social skills. Those are my actual subjects. And then everything else is an outcome of that. Maybe podcasting, but that's about it. How about yourself?
See, what I would venture as my expertise is also where about 99% people will tell you कि एक number का fraud quack है. ठीक है? So I would say security and defense, foreign policy, food, government policy in general. I think travel and the fine life, the good life kind of thing. I think, that would be it. Anything except sports, physical activity, slogging it or doing a hard day's work.
Mm.
Except those subjects, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, the subjects you named are actually very hot topics on the Indian internet. So let's dive into it. We're recording this on the 5th of May, 2023. It's probably going to be released 2 or 3 weeks from now. I personally feel there's no point talking about that missile that supposedly, and I highlight supposedly, hit Putin thanks to the Ukrainians. Was it truly the Ukrainians? Or was it Putin just like throwing a missile on his roof and saying, Ukraine?
See, these days, the level of disinformation is so much you can't really tell. So, 2 drones the, and those 2 drones, one hit, I mean, from my angle, it was the east wing of the Kremlin, but it could have been the west wing of the Grand Palace of the Kremlin. The second hit the dome, which is apparently Putin's office is directly under that dome offset. But when you look at the scale of the explosion, it couldn't have really done much to that dome, right? The thing is, the Ukrainians did admit a drone that got shot down the previous week that had about 15 kilos of explosives in it. Are they capable of doing it? Yes, they've carried out lots of covert bombings, but those have been intelligence style, car bombings and things like that in Moscow. It would be a considerable escalation, but as of now, Putin hasn't done anything. And, he's kind of not doing anything that we actually expect him to do.
What do we expect him to do?
Go berserk. He's been quite restrained in what he's been targeting in Ukraine. And, people watching this will be going, hello, restrained. That's not what it looks like on the ground, but by Russian standards. See, there's a big difference between American war fighting and Russian war fighting. Americans are very pinpoint, accurate, and precise. So they win wars very quickly with great precision. All the deaths that happen is after the occupation begins because they screw up all the social policy that comes after it, like Iraq or Afghanistan and things.
After the occupation begins, once they...
So, they occupied Iraq in about 30 days, right? But all the deaths that happened were after that period, right? Because all the terrorism started. They did something very stupid, which was dismiss all the Baath Party members from government. And, to be a member of government, you had to be in the Baath Party. So when you've literally thrown out the entire trained workforce out onto the streets because of political affiliation, all of them took up arms, and that was the beginning of the Iraq insurgency, right? Which then killed God knows how many hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, on a very primal level, I feel like I don't blame them for this, but Americans live within America even in their mind. Even mentally, they don't know too much about the outside world.
It's not that they don't know. They actually have very, very good sources because, unlike India, there is no money to go do primary research. There, the moment you sort of get, even in your towards the end of your bachelor's degree, you will get scholarships to actually go to the region of your studies, spend a year, 2 years, collect primary data is always gold, right? You'll always learn more going to a place than reading about it.
Primary data means the data you collect when you're there yourself in that region. Okay,
exactly. So they do a lot of that. The problem is they're very jaundiced towards points of view that they don't want to hear. So the guy who dismissed the Baath Party, Paul Bremer, was a dolt. And he was listening to these sort of wishful prognostications from Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney on top, which is why he did what he did. But there was no pushback from the system. See, so that's the danger of the American system. They have the knowledge. They have an aversion to listening to points of view that they don't like. Okay. And they're very binary. Like George Bush used to say, you're either with me or you're against me. There's no, you can be with me and still shades of grey. Afghanistan, same thing. They managed to defeat the Taliban in a month, 2 months. I forget now what it was. And all the problems started after that. Well, I mean, not all the problem, but the problems didn't stop after that.
What's happening behind the curtains? They're extracting oil from those countries, or they're just there? What do they don't show on the news?
So, I'm not a big believer in the sort of deep state, conspiracy theory kind of thing. Is there corruption involved in it? So, for example, does the military industrial complex and big business want contracts? Yes. Will they lobby for certain wars so that, existing stocks of bombs will be depleted and you'll get new contracts and things? Yes. Is there also a very conscientious and strong objection to it within the system? Yes. Is there some level of, really naive, stupid ideology that, we need to give the world freedom and democracy kind of nonsense, is also there. And, that's a very dangerous kind of ideology, but it's also there. So it's a combination of so many things. You really can't assign a value to how much each of these things play. Are they extracting oil? No, they were actually quite keen on giving the Afghan resources back to the Afghans. They were quite keen on giving, for Iraq to become a sort of prosperous society. But, for all that wisdom and knowledge that comes out of America, like I said, they don't understand that human beings develop differently under different stimulus. You can't just go give people democracy and expect them to become like America overnight. It doesn't happen that way. That is not how societies evolve.
You think that's their true core intention? That they're spreading democracy all over the world?
No.
There are economic
of course,
layers.
Of course, there's economic layers to it. There's economic layers to it. There's also ideological layers to it. Which are this freedom.
Okay.
That, it makes a better society. Liberty, freedom, and democracy. They actually believe that they are doing good for people by making them free.
Okay.
I find it very childlike almost. It's quite endearing were it not for the fact it kills so many people. It's like, have you watched this movie Omen?
Way back, but yes.
Yeah. Think of it as Damien minus the diabolical intent, but say an accidental Damien who goes around killing his nanny and his parents without realizing what he's done.
Okay, cool, fair.
Yeah.
The context here is that Omen was a movie where the kid was possessed or he was the devil.
He was the devil incarnate.
Avatar of
he had
the
that,
devil.
Yeah. He had that 666 in his... somewhere under, the audience can't get me being bald, but anyway, under the hair somewhere it was buried.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're saying that they basically have shades of good intent, shades of money-making intent, go out there, go into a country with the intention of giving that country democracy and liberty. They also cause a lot of damage because possibly the social science that they understand doesn't apply to that country.
Right. And a lot of their, their baseline is World War II. That they destroyed, they crushed Germany, they crushed Japan, and both of them were horrible dictatorships, Italy too. They gave them democracy, and these countries turned into nice, peaceful states that, that are still independent, that are still very independent, that can do things that really piss off America every now and then, but they're generally within the American worldview of things. They are integrated into an American market. They do not have these sort of dictatorial tendencies. And their people are prosperous, happy, healthy, and they're not dying in wars. And, they believe this can be done everywhere. What they forget is that, Germany had 100 years of development prior to World War II. More, possibly. Same with Japan. In 1870, when Commodore Perry goes and opens up Japan... since then, they've been modernizing, right? Italy, Mussolini had already started modernizing Italy since about 1920 when he came to power. Afghanistan is not like that. Iraq is not like that. They were nowhere near the human development that these other three countries were. For you to do this, that it just needs one thing. So, for example, let me give this to you in builder terminology, right? Say the builder really screwed up the building. You will spend the rest of your life fixing something or the other. The roof will leak, so you'll have to keep painting every year. The pipes will burst. The geyser will stop working. The hot water system will stop working. The AC venting would be all wrong. You'll have to keep spending. And so it's small amounts of money that you keep spending. On the other hand, if you go to a good builder, which is to say good human development, you invest in human beings, not in machines. You just have to fix one thing. This guy just needs money. And if I give him that investment capital, he can then grow from that, right? That's the difference. So once a country develops, like Germany, Japan, and Italy had at that point, it required very little for them to become stable.
The basis of this is education, right?
Total.
Like once you go through an education system, you are changed as a human being.
Education system and jobs which give you that kind of discipline. Where the population is not overwhelmingly unemployed rioting on the streets. They actually have jobs to go to. They can't they can't watch politics. They'd rather not. They'd much rather go to jobs and earn money to put food on the table or take their holidays and things like that.
Okay, bit of a rookie question. Why do we see so many kids losing their limbs in Iraq and Afghanistan? Like, why are civilians then harmed once the Americans are there?
It's a lot to do with resistance that comes to American rule. See, Americans might think that they're giving you freedom and democracy, but the oppressed people might not actually want that freedom. So, for example, when I was in Afghanistan, it was very surprising in the cities, in Herat, in Kabul, in Mazari Sharif, they would all be like, this is a good thing. We want this to continue because women have rights and things like that. You go into the villages in Afghanistan and their take on it was completely different. It was like women's liberation. What exactly is that? They don't even know what that is. It's not in their priority list. So, it's literally like going to see if you're selling a weight loss and muscle building program to me, clearly because I look like a hippopotamus, I need it. But if somebody's trying to sell that to you, it's a very stupid salesman, right? So different people want different things. And I don't think the Americans think that everybody wants what they want.
Okay.
And that's frequently not the case.
Lack of empathy on a little large scale.
It's a bit too much empathy. It's suffocating empathy. It's like a typical Indian or Jewish mother who,
overfeeds
you to the point of suffocating you.
Okay. Why the f*** are you in Afghanistan, bro?
Because I'm a nut job. So I do so there's a lot of work travel. Like almost every month I'm out of the country on work. But
whoa. Why work travel? Like, what are you working?
Conferences and things like that, right? But those are like, they're fun in that you meet people, but it's the same standard routine. Here to the airport, there's already a car waiting for you there, 5-star hotel, a conference for 3 days, and you come back. You're not actually, and the visits are all curated to the predetermined restaurant and things like that. Maximum you'll get to do 1 or 2 days of private tourism on a Saturday or Sunday if you time it properly.
But parallelly, to give context, you have a degree in international relations.
Yeah.
What is your occupation right now? Because of that?
I'm a think tanker. So I work at a think tank where I'm a senior fellow. I don't know what that exactly means, but anyway, I'm a senior fellow. And mostly what I do is fundraising for my think tank and training up the kids. Because I love working with kids because, curiosity is such a lovely thing to nurture. Teaching them to write, teaching them how to think, etc., etc.
In Afghanistan?
Not in Afghanistan. No. So Afghanistan was because, so this is what most of my travel looks like. But then I do 2 big trips every year. One is to a holiday for about a month and a half, 2 months, which is just going off to Europe, or Thailand or Cambodia or something like that, lying down on a beach, eating great food and enjoying myself. The second is always an adventure trip going to places that nobody else wants to go to. So I went to North Korea, to Afghanistan, to Iraq.
Podcast content.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Go on.
To Syria. I'm going to go to Saudi Arabia next. A bit too late because I wanted to go see a public execution, but Mohammed bin Salman has banned public execution. So all my dreams are now shattered.
Saudi Arabia has its face turn. You know what a face turn is?
Now they've become super liberal.
Yeah.
It's like amazing. I think the whole world, thank you, Jamal Khashoggi, but your sacrifice was worth it. Thank you for your sacrifice, but MBS is my man. but there's Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. Uh, by the end of this year, in winter, I'm planning on going to Oymyakon, which is the coldest place on earth. It goes down to minus 60 degrees Celsius.
Where is it?
It's in far eastern Russia, northeast of Mongolia. So, I like these kind of things because there are no 5-star hotels. You're lucky if you get decent toilets, but you're going around talking to people. You're going totally dressed as a local or unassuming, actually meeting people, talking to them, seeing everything that is not taught to you in books or told to you on TV. Right? And that's why I went to Afghanistan, because everything we've read about Afghanistan is from American or British people writing in books. How many Indians have actually gone to places like Ghor or Ghazni or sat down with, Taliban commanders and spoken to them? Nobody did. And my thing was, boss, when an American goes and interviews a Taliban commander, he's coming from a different place. He understands things differently. He contextualizes differently. I'm an Indian. I will contextualize things very differently. The questions I ask will also be very different. The way I ask those questions, and you know this because you're a podcaster, it so much depends on how you ask the question. So that's why I was there. So I spent a whole month out there doing tourism, yes, but mostly going and interviewing Taliban commanders to see how they felt, what their outlook was, etc., etc. I got a lot of things wrong, but you also get a lot of things right. I think interviewing Taliban commanders was such... You're shitting in your pants, right? Like, you don't know what's going to happen because you've heard that these guys are really, really nasty characters. They probably are, but they're kind of on their best behavior for you, or maybe it's just normal behavior. I don't know.
Because you're Indian?
Yeah. And surprisingly, that was the case. There was absolutely no hatred towards India, even amongst the Taliban. Like, when I'd bring up Pakistan, they'd almost always go, because they hated Pakistan. These were people who were literally Haqqani network, which is one wing of the Taliban, or Quetta Shura, which is the other wing. I don't know which one they were because there was kind of a linguistic problem. It was all done through interpreters. They think they can speak Hindi. Their Hindi is kind of unintelligible to us. I mean, they think they're speaking Hindi, but it's not Hindi. Their families have been held hostage by the ISI. They're told to do certain things because of the ISI, but their own view isn't beyond their area.
How have their families been held hostage by the ISI?
Because they all went over the border to avoid the American bombing or an American pacification campaign or whatever. And the Pakistanis always knew who the Taliban were. So they'd keep your family and hold them as hostages, kind of. I mean, very comfortable hostage situation, but hostages nevertheless.
Sure.
To ensure that you behave and do what the Pakistanis want you to do. Right? And this was chronic. And they actually have a great sense of being Afghan. There's a great pride in being Afghan. And they don't like a foreign country, as they see it, interfering in their affairs. Whereas all I ever encountered for India, except maybe in Kandahar was the one exception, was a whole load of affection for India. To be fair, all these interviews were conducted in when I was high on hashish. So, because it's a cultural thing out there.
Yeah.
So, if you go interview them, you will start by smoking, I think it's a hookah. I mean, it's something.
Chillam, like an Afghani chillam.
Kind of. I mean, it's somewhere between a hookah and a chillam, where you have hashish. Right. And the thing is, there's always one guy with a AK-47 or AK-74, whatever, standing there to see if you're drugged up enough
to break the ice.
Because see, that is how trust is built in their society. We both have hash and there is this bonding, like bros, kind of whatever.
Bro, just get the chillam. Sorry, no. Aryan, sorry, go on.
And it's so cultural out there. It's like, it's almost like here, you bring out the coffee or the mithai or whatever when somebody comes. There, it's like, okay, you want to have a serious chat? Let's get the hash out first. I mean, it was, I'm not going to do it again, but it was fun. And
Were you scared for your life? That maybe when you're high on hash, they'll just shoot you with the AK-47?
in the first 4-5 times, I was very, very scared. Because, my first encounter, so the first 7 days were being a tourist in Afghanistan, right? So from my first encounter with the Taliban proper was in Mazari Sharif, going to the city of Balkh. Balkh is an old ruined city. So it was sacked by Timur. It was sacked by Genghis Khan. And it's a lovely walled city. It's also where Alexander's wife Roxanne came from. And it's also apparently where Zoroaster was born. So on our way to Balkh is this thing called the Nau Gumbad Masjid, the Mosque of 9 Domes, which was Zoroaster, which was a Buddhist stupa or something before. And before that, it was a Zoroastrian fire temple. And the guy there, the caretaker there, he lost his entire family sometime during the war. And all he does is he caretakes that mosque. It's in ruins, but he caretakes it. And he grows his own poppies and hash and things like that. And so that was the first time I tried hash. And en route to Balkh, there was suddenly the army checkpoints ended and the Taliban checkpoints started. And that's where they were, with AK-47s out there. And you just know these guys are not army.
What's the vibe generally?
Our driver was quite relaxed. I was not. I had never had a high like that, right? That hash high kind of thing. So for me, my memory is very lucid. I was on one hand, I was like holding my sphincter in. I was like absolutely sure I was going to shit my pants at any point. But I was also kind of very excited. There's that thrill and danger as well. I mean, kind of. I mean, there's no real way to describe it. It's
S&M vacations.
Yeah.
God.
I guess it's one of those full-on BDSM moments,
Live
right?
BDSM.
The high from the pain kind of thing, or the high from the danger in this case kind of thing.
I meant, what's the vibe of those guys? Like I'm sure when you look at them in the eye.
They're quite relaxed.
Okay.
They're quite relaxed, right? They're not on edge. And the first 4-5 interviews were quite intimidating. Like, as in, I was like, the hash went a long way calming me down. So that was there. But then in Kandahar, it became a very nasty situation because when I landed, there was this, the guard that I'd hired, he heard on the radio chatter that there's an Indian in town. And that became a thing in Kandahar. So I had to be evacuated.
Why?
I don't know why. Kandahar was the only city I found that was quite hostile. I couldn't stay. I was in Kandahar for all of 3-4 hours before the local commander out there sent whatever to pick me up. And at that point, I didn't know if this was a setup or something where I'd be kidnapped and taken and found with my head chopped off.
You visualize that?
Yeah. Till you realize they've got a very strict honor code. They've got a very, very strict honor code about these things.
About any killing that they'll carry out.
Well, about giving you their word and they're secure, saying that you're secure kind of thing.
So the Taliban in parts of Afghanistan minus Kandahar told you that, listen, you'll be safe.
So even in Kandahar, I was probably safe. The thing was, everybody was talking about an Indian who had come.
Why?
I don't know. Maybe the airport authorities leaked it or something, trying to stir up mischief. I still don't know.
But so what if you're Indian?
It becomes an issue because then they kidnap you.
For money?
For money or
Okay.
what? I mean, you don't know what they kidnap you for, right? It's a very disorganized kind of thing. So there'll be wheels within wheels who'd want you for money or to,
They'll make you build a robotic suit for their... I'm kidding.
Not that I'm a scientist or anything. That robotic suit will be a gift for their enemies because it'll be like, it'll break down every 5 seconds. But I did at that. I don't think I've panicked as much as I did at that point of thing. And a lot of it was the stimuli coming with, my driver and the guard telling me to
Get the out.
get the fuck.
If you hadn't gone, what would have happened? What do you think?
I don't know. With the benefit of hindsight, it's very easy to say probably nothing. But then, you never really.
You intuitively felt like your life was in danger.
I panicked.
Okay.
I still remember I couldn't think straight. I wasn't screaming or going hysterical or anything, because when I panic, I kind of lock down and go very, very quiet.
Okay. Why don't you describe Afghanistan a little bit to just take people into that world? Is it true that it's like a dry Himachal Pradesh?
Yeah, I mean, if you've gone to Ladakh and things like that, that's kind of what you're seeing, like that, the lunar landscape, as they call it. So parts of Himachal, Uttarakhand that you go in the higher Himalayas, that's kind of what it's like. Very dry, but there are sometimes lush valleys in the middle of all the dryness, right? So when you go to the Panjshir Valley, where Ahmad Shah Massoud, resisted the Russians for like 10 years or whatever, it's lush green. So it's like, it's almost like a cartoon. The hills are totally dry and barren. The drive up there is totally barren. And suddenly in the middle, there's this beautiful blue stream with fertile green fields on both sides, right? So it's a very stark landscape. It's a very beautiful landscape. And you can understand why it's a very unforgiving landscape. You don't have much room for error out there if you're a pre-industrial agricultural society.
What does that mean?
So, if you industrialize and you start having manufacturing jobs and things like that, you can import your food from anywhere, right? You're not going to have famines. You're connected to the whole world, etc., etc. It's like, say something like Montana or the Rocky Mountain states, where, even small villages will have these 6-lane highways running through them. Well, not 6-lane, but at least really good highways running through them. And if you want to go to, say, Buenos Aires the next day, or you take a local flight or a helicopter out to Arizona and then catch a plane from whatever, McCarran Airport, whatever. Oh, Nevada. Sorry, but whatever. You get what I mean. Here, it's your valley is your village. It's your whole world. It's your whole life. You probably haven't even been outside of there. If you're cut off in winter and food is running short, there will be starvation. There will probably be death. So you need to maximize your survivability. And so you go raiding. You raid the next valley or the next village.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a very active practice today.
It's a very active practice. It's quite violent. And Afghanistan is a society that you suspect has gone back in time, because when you go see the mosques in places like Herat, for example, these are mosques which could not have been built by a poor society that you see right now. These had to have been incredibly rich societies. It's actually gone back in time where that Silk Route trade has reduced. So the wealth has reduced very considerably. So they had to go back to kind of subsistence farming and things. And it's a society that's kind of devolved.
So there's two versions of the Taliban that you hear of. One is the violent version that does all the things that the mainstream news talks about, that the kind of news that spreads online. And the other one is this like security-oriented version of the Taliban. Because maybe if you really take an empathetic viewpoint, and you put yourself in the shoes of those Afghani kids who would have grown up in the last 20 years seeing all this war, they probably would have wanted to fix their whole country. There has to have been some group of people like that. So I'm assuming they've made it safer.
They have. It's, the truth is probably variable and somewhere in between. So, for example, all the older people I spoke to in Afghanistan remember that the first time the Taliban came to power, in 98, 99, sometime at that time, they were very, very nasty. Because, they were like ISIS. When ISIS came to power in Al-Raqqa, everything was ideology. It wasn't the practicality.
Okay.
And now the ISIS has gone through puberty Taliban has gone through puberty and matured. And now it's like a 30, 40-year-old man. So they're much more restrained. This is all relatively we're talking about, right?
It's hell for women. That's all.
Not as bad as it was before.
Okay.
The enforcement is a lot less pervasive and a lot less strict. So, for example, a lot of the friends I made when Kabul fell were desperate to get out. And we were trying to arrange visas for them. In some cases, we succeeded. In most cases, we did not succeed. But I'm still in touch with the people where we did not succeed. And they're like, we don't want to come now. It's not as bad as we thought it would be. So it's...
Joy of podcasting. You'll never hear this on the news.
Yeah. And they're going to make memes out of this and troll me for saying this.
Oh, that's okay, man.
Big deal. It is, I mean, I have to tell you what I saw, not what other people want me to say.
Sure.
So, people make do. We somehow think that, unless, your childhood is getting drunk and vomiting all over the car back home and, having gratuitous sex every second day or every 30 seconds or whatever it is, the current acceptable frequency is, you're somehow oppressed or whatever. People have different realities. They live different lives. People make do. They adjust. It's a natural coping mechanism.
Are the raids still happening in those villages?
I suspect they would.
Because it's extremely remote.
Exactly. You won't really be able to tell, but the kind of extraordinary violence you were seeing against an occupying power, which was nasty, because that is vastly reduced out there.
Okay. What's the vibe of Afghans in general? Not the Talibans. Taliban, people, Talibani. What's the word?
I've never... Talibani.
Okay.
This is something very common I've seen in Kashmir, Afghanistan, a lot of places. Conflict societies that have had long conflict, they're schizophrenic, they're bipolar. They lie a lot, because lying is kind of a protection mechanism, because you never know what is the right answer and wrong answer, where you end up with a bullet in your head. They can go from extremely warm to extremely hostile very quickly. I could not live there. For me, being where all I have, it would be a nightmare for me. But they've grown up in the middle of all of that and adjusted, right? So, for example, if you go to the villages, I couldn't interview a single woman outside the cities. Because if a woman approached me for something, they would have probably shot her.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's full burqa, and it doesn't matter if they were pro-government or pro-Taliban at that time. At that time, remember, the government was in power. This was 2019, early 2019. The lived reality of those women was burqa, no talking to men outside. Only the city women, if you went to the university or bookshops and things like that, you could have a conversation with them. Okay. This was something that came out for example, in Mazar-e-Sharif, which is largely an Uzbek city, because there are many nationalities in Afghanistan. So, the previous year in 2018, I'd been to Uzbekistan. And Uzbekistan is, you see that how much a modern national border can completely change the mindset, right? So Uzbekistan was captured in the late 1800s by a Russian general called Konstantin von Kaufmann-Turkestansky for the Tsar. His great-great-great-great-granddaughter is a very dear friend of mine, and she shows me all these archival things that her great-great-granddad did. But when I went to Uzbekistan, it was really strange. I know when to play up my Indianness and when not to. So, for example, in Egypt, Uzbekistan, and North Korea, I'll wear a kurta pajama and not jeans or t-shirt, because then they're like, you're an Indian.
Really?
Yeah. And they want to have a chat with you. They want to know more about you. They're not interested in the Americans.
Which other country did you say? Egypt?
Egypt, North Korea, Israel, Syria. Israel and Syria can't stand each other, but when they see an Indian in a kurta and a pajama, I suspect it works for women.
Butter chicken.
Not butter chicken, but so in Egypt, they're like, Amitabh Bachchan, Amitabh Bachchan, Amitabh Bachchan. In Syria, they want to come have a chat with you. In North Korea, they're like, oh, you don't look like all these other people. And you don't dress like all these other people.
By all these other people, they mean fellow North Koreans?
No, the Gora Admis that I was traveling with in North Korea.
There are other people who come.
Yeah. It's carefully curated groups that go out.
It's all psychos like you.
Yeah.
Like, let's go to North Korea for a
Exactly.
vacation. Great.
And, so Uzbekistan mein kya tha? I went to this in, was it Bukhara or Samarkand? I forget. One of those two cities, there is the Madrasa of Ulugh Beg. Ulugh Beg was the guy who drove Babur out of Farghana and forced him to come to India. He was also Timur's great-grandson or Timur's grandson. And what happened with him in that madrasa was this Uzbek guy, he sees me in this shocking pink kurta and similar white pajamas as this. And he says, oh, you're an Indian. Come talk to me in broken English. And we go into the madrasa and he takes out a bottle of vodka and sala, which is salted cured pork fat.
It's an Islamic country.
It's not an Islamic country. It's technically a secular country. But a muazzin or a scholar at a madrasa, one of the most historic madrasas, you're sitting and having this conversation with him over vodka and pork.
What's his religion?
Muslim. He's actually a religious scholar, yeah.
And the rest of the country?
And I didn't ask him because there was a big language barrier. There was no interpreter there.
Okay.
The rest of the country is also quite liberal. They're very, very modern because, see, the Soviets, what they did in the 1920s when they took power was they shoved industrialization down their throat. They built factories. They said no more. If you went to a mosque, you'd probably taken out and shot. So you had to openly show that you were not religious to fit in. And so they completely de-ethnicized them, de-Uzbeked them into, this urban homogenous worker class.
Was the USSR also in that same zone about religion and spiritualism? As far as I know, they were, right?
They hated spiritualism. They used to crack down very brutally on all religion.
Even Christianity?
Even Christianity.
Really?
It was tolerated to an extent in that outward signs are tolerated, but any real sign of religiosity would be crushed very, very brutally.
What would count as a real...
praying 5 times a day for a Muslim. Going to a mosque every Friday.
The Christian version?
The Christian version, again, would be going to church too often. So, for them, we went down to the Termez border crossing, which is the border crossing between Uzbekistan and Afghanistan. And there were literally Uzbek women wearing skirts and shorts there who'd sit up on the hill with binoculars and telescopes and look at fellow Uzbeks on the other side of the border while drinking vodka or Coke. I mean, a lot of it was cold drinks. There wasn't that much vodka. I just saw one bottle of vodka there. But looking at fellow Uzbeks on the other side completely smothered in burqas. And for them, this was their equivalent of going to the zoo. They're seeing fellow Uzbeks who have not developed, who do not know the lifestyle that a modern Uzbek does, a modern Uzbek does, as opposed to an Afghan Uzbek does. And the next year when I went to Mazari Sharif, which is very close to the Uzbek border from the Afghan side, the mindset was totally different. So, in India, you hear that the Taliban is mainly a Pashtun thing. The Uzbeks don't want to have anything to do with it. The Hazaras and the Shias don't want to. That wasn't what I found there. Because when I was talking to Uzbek women in the city, they're like, the Taliban is us. What are they?
In an Afghan city.
Yeah, and they were willingly wearing the burqa. Full burqa. It plays with your mind, there's so much that you're kind of fed, which you just accept as truth till you actually face a situation where same people, same ethnicity, just separated by a border in history. How can they be so totally different?
Do you see war in their eyes?
No. I keep reading this thing. You can see the devastation of war in their eyes. You can see the trauma in their eyes. You can't. I've never been able to see it anywhere that I've been because humans are extraordinarily resilient. They cope. They find happiness wherever they can. Even under the worst circumstances, I think it's human to find happiness. And what I've seen is that the worse the situation, the more people take pleasure in the small things in life. And it makes you feel really blessed.
What do they think of white people in America in general? Afghanistan?
They don't like white people at all.
America?
Even America.
Especially America or even America?
Even America.
So they just generally don't like white people?
They don't like white people.
Because even Russia had like taken over.
Even Russia. I mean, when you have these political conversations, they're like, oh, the Russians weren't that bad. The Americans are a lot worse, which is complete rubbish. The Russians actually were much more indiscriminate in their killing. But, the older era that you have not lived through always seems better than the current bad period.
Okay.
I didn't take that too seriously, but they do not like the white man.
And parallelly, they look at India as a friend.
They do. Across the board, even the Taliban. They're like, they thought I have some influence in Delhi or whatever. I'm like, sorry, I can't do diddly squat in Delhi, but I wasn't going to tell them that. But they're like, you should tell your government to come talk to us. Things like that. So it was, I did not see any ill will towards India. Quite the contrary, a huge amount of, positive emotion. They do want to talk to you. They feel you're one of them. They'll come and sing Bollywood songs which are not Hindi. They think they're singing Hindi. So, for example, the guy who was driving me around for about 2-3 days, he used to keep insisting on singing Suhana Safar or Ye Mausam Hasi. Okay. Except he couldn't say Suhana Safar or Ye Mausam Hasi. He would say, Aju Baju Kachu Pachu Chu Chu Chu. He thought he was, do you understand? And then he turned around and said, you understand? Like, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah. You don't want to tell them, dude, that's not Hindi, but...
Should have sung Bora Bora Dela Kara. You know that? No. You felt connected to him.
Acha.
Well, I'm assuming they speak Arabic, right?
No. They speak Dari, which is Proto-Persian.
Some version of Farsi.
Dari speakers will tell you that it is the original Persian, whereas the Persians will tell you that Persian is the original Persian.
Okay.
But they speak different languages. I could understand, say, about 10 to 15% because, we use so much Farsi even in Hindi today.
Did you see kids playing cricket?
No. I never saw anybody play cricket.
How is that country coming up as a cricket nation? They've become really good. That's the cricket context.
Every kid that I saw was playing football. I did not come across a single cricket match. I was very curious to see cricket out there, but nobody was playing cricket. Everybody was playing football.
Kidnapping kids from Pakistan? Fast bowler, come.
But kuch nahi tha.
Really?
Nothing. Yeah.
How are they so good at cricket?
I don't know. Like, I don't follow cricket. Sorry. You've taken me into outside comfort zone because cricket is like one of those things I know nothing about.
The context is, we used to have 3 great subcontinental teams and Bangladesh was the fighting team. They all try to be at a level. And everyone expected that Bangladesh would become really good when I was growing up. Sri Lanka was solid, consistent team. And India and Pakistan are the giants always. India and Pakistan have stayed at that same giant status. Sri Lanka has tanked. Bangladesh hasn't grown the way we expected it to, but they've become better. But Afghanistan is at the same level that Bangladesh is at now. Probably. Yeah.
Not bad, yeah. Not bad.
Where are the reasons? And cricket is a very resource-centric game. You need to have good bats. You need to have season balls. You need to have balls to play the game anyway.
True.
What is happening in Afghanistan?
But tell me, are those Afghans who have grown up in Afghanistan or the Afghans who have grown up in Delhi or Rawalpindi or things like that?
Man, I don't know.
See, that's another thing. Because I didn't even see an organized cricket pitch in Afghanistan ever.
Fair. There are parts of Delhi where there are actual Afghan restaurants where you'll be served by
it's Lajpat Nagar. Yeah. So there's a place called Mazar out there, which is my favorite restaurant. So I'll go there once every 2-3 months or something like that to get my Afghan food fix.
Yeah. The beautiful people.
They're lovely.
No, I mean, they look beautiful.
No, they physically also, they're very, you could be quite dark and fit in there. You could be a white man and also fit in there, because some Afghans are very, very fair. It's such, ethnically, it's such a wide melting pot of different cultures. There are
Right.
people who look kind of Mongolo-Sinitic kind of thing. And they're very, very, very attractive people. I think the only thing I couldn't deal with in Afghanistan, well, two things I couldn't deal with in Afghanistan, is that their hygiene culture is as bad as India. So the public toilets stink as bad as they do in India. You'd rather not go to a public toilet when you're traveling. You'd rather go outside.
Does it smell like
And-
Arabic coffee? Sorry, I'm kidding, bro.
It does not.
I
Arabic
had
coffee
to-
smells really good, dude. Yeah.
If you have a lot of black coffee, never mind. We're going.
Oh, God. No. I don't know. I've never had that much black coffee. But to be fair, every time I've been to countries that have a lot of that thick black coffee served in a teacup, their toilet culture is actually very clean. So I've never had toilet nightmares in Syria or Jordan or Iraq, for that matter. Though, no. And the second thing, which was very problematic for me, is eating sheep.
Why?
Because, in India, what we call mutton is actually goat. We
Right.
eat goats. They eat sheep.
Which is lamb, right? Like
Yeah,
all
but
over
see,
the world.
lamb is under 6 months, it's lamb. They eat mutton. So in India, what happens is from 0 to 6 months, it's called kid. Over 6 months, it's called chevon, technically. That's the technical term for what we eat. With sheep, 0 to 6 months is lamb. That's when the flavor isn't so developed. It's quite mild. 6 months to 2 years is a hogget. And over 2 years is mutton, where, the fat has developed, the animal has become big, puberty has set in for several seasons now. And, fat is a big capturer of flavor. So it reeks.
Really?
Yeah. So, and you are what you eat. Like, when you go to Bihar or Bengal, you smell the mustard oil on my fellow Bengalis. You smell the sheep meat everywhere. And I find that very problematic.
What does it smell like?
To me, it smells quite rancid. It smells like armpits that haven't been washed for like 10, 12 days.
Really?
Yeah.
What kind of food do they normally eat? There's a lot of bread, there's a lot of meat.
Yeah. And
That's about it.
that's what I find really strange, right? Like the initial 7 days, which was the tourist part of it, my guide told me, no, we actually eat a lot of vegetables, but it's all at home. But the remaining 22, 23 days, I was only eating at people's houses. And there was no vegetable ever served to me. It was just meat in some form or the other, mostly grilled, not even gravies that much, very dry food. And when you come
masalas?
No masalas. Maximum there'll be jeera.
Jeera, salt,
If
meat.
at all that. Basically just salt and meat.
Damn.
With a pulao. And then everybody makes the same pulao. There is raisins in it, carrots, onion, a little bit of jeera, cumin, and basmati rice. And that's it. There's fried fish, which is just turmeric and salt. No spices really. Very, very dry food. Not even something like when you come from India, which is a very gravy-centric, you have your dry stuff, but you don't feel complete unless there's some gravy item on the table, right?
You enjoy wetness.
Exactly, to enjoy. How do you make that sound so perverted?
I'm bouncing off your energy.
So he just called me a pervert. Did you see that? He called me a pervert. Anyway.
Indians enjoy wetness, bro. Need some wetness in your mouth. To really think that, okay, I had a good time in my meal today.
Okay, let's move on because that's, okay. But it was just really dry food. And at the end of it, I was like, I need my spices. I need my dal. I need my, when I came back for a whole month, I just couldn't look at meat. And the only thing I was eating every single day was spinach and karela, bitter gourd. and not potato and not carrots. It was just green leafy vegetables in some form or the other.
No concept of restaurants or anything?
No, lots of restaurants. Lots of restaurants. It's a bit of your culture where you'll actually go out, and restaurants aren't very pricey out there. There's restaurants for every strata of society. So even the average guy can go to a roadside kebabari and eat a stick of mutton, as in proper mutton, not what Indians call mutton, but
Sheep mutton.
rancid sheep mutton kebabs, with roti, with lots of roti. They have lots of bread. They're mostly a bread culture. Not so rice is more a celebration dish, but mostly bread. Yeah.
What about rich Afghans?
Rich Afghans eat very much the same thing, which I found quite surprising, that there's absolutely no diversity of cuisines. And at the same time, there is a great democratization of cuisine, because what the poor man eats is also what the rich man eats.
What do you do if you have money in Afghanistan? How do they feel about being governed by the Taliban?
Well, I don't know how they feel now, but when I was there, all the rich people absolutely did not want to be governed by the Taliban. The rich people that I've stayed in touch with are now like, it's not so bad. It's not as bad as we thought it would be. And the one thing I noticed, because, I was making friends there for the first time. So, you can't get too intrusive about their private lives. But something I noticed was all the pictures of them living life and enjoying themselves was in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Doha or something like that, or Paris or London. It wasn't in Afghanistan. And I suspect that's what rich Afghans do. They use Dubai as a money laundering and money storing pad.
Okay. Just like the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do they look back at Osama bin Laden?
There is no collective memory at all of
Really?
him. Because I went on asking about Osama bin Laden. They're like, who? Kind of. I mean,
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they've all kind of heard about him, but they're like, what does that have to do with me?
So what was their impression when America started taking over the country? These white boys are here just taking over.
So, most of the people I met were in their 30s and 40s who don't have too much of a memory before the takeover. The ones who did, again, it was a mixed bag. Some of them felt that the Russian occupation was somehow better, which I think was more of a sort of, placebo to say that time was good and this time is not good kind of thing. There were a lot of people who were like, it's different. The city dwellers had mostly come back from exile in Pakistan or India or Iran. So, it was, and for them, it was more hope about the future, and they were worried about what's happening right now. It was a very, very mixed bag. There was no uniformity of views on that.
Geopolitically, what's happening now in the Afghanistan region? Is it true that the Taliban is gearing up for a bit of a battle with Pakistan? That's true.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. So, I got one thing very, very wrong in my analysis when I came back, and I got one thing very, very right. What I got very, very wrong was thinking that the Afghan army will be able to put up a fight after the Americans left. And, when the government forces collapsed, we were doing satellite analysis. I wasn't wrong in that they probably could have put up a fight. They didn't want to put up a fight. What they do is, at the point of contact between the Taliban forces and the army, they would go up to the point of contact, they would abandon their tanks or armored vehicles, and without them getting destroyed, and they would just move back. So it was more like they threw the battle than they lost the battle.
Okay. To save their lives.
No, there was some kind of an arrangement. There was some kind, because remember when the Taliban took over in 98, they went straight, when they took over Kabul, they went straight for the UN compound, tortured and killed Najibullah, who had been the president for the previous 8-9 years, and then hanged him and his brother. They chopped off his genitals while he was still alive and took him and hanged him in a lamppost outside the UN compound. When they took over Kabul this time, they did nothing of that sort to Hamid Karzai and all those people. Nobody who collaborated, none of the senior leadership who collaborated with the Americans was executed that way.
Where are they kept now?
They're quite free. I don't know them personally, but I know them through very dear friends who are on a first name basis with them. They're kind of free to move around. I mean, they can't just go. I mean, it's not exactly you can go abroad, but within Kabul and within Afghanistan, they have freedom to move. So yeah, it was a very weird.
Do you think the Taliban is being funded by other countries?
I think we're funding them now. Largely,
Really?
yeah. A lot of them come. My doctor friends, they all tell me that there's always every week there's a new bunch of Afghan patients who come, where the government picks up the tab for their treatment in Delhi. And that 50% that I got right was that even the Haqqani network, which is as per Indian literature prior to the fall of Kabul last year, was implacably hostile to India and a complete puppet of the Pakistanis and the ISI. And I said very clearly, boss, that's not going to happen. The moment they come to power, they're going to screw Pakistan over. And that's exactly what they do. They're screwing Pakistan over. So there are a lot of the leadership coming to Delhi for medical treatment. And as I understand it, our contacts with them are growing. Remember, for all the criticism of Indian foreign policy, even with the Taliban in power, except for those 2 years in 98, 19, or rather 99, 2000, when the Taliban 1.0 was in power, we have had the best of relationship with the Afghans, right? And it takes a lot to have that to project soft power and goodwill into a country where you have no natural border with.
Okay. It is a case of my enemy's enemy is my friend, right?
Yeah.
It's effectively geopolitics.
It is geopolitics, but it's also ethnicity. See, for them, Pakistan is a hated enemy. You know why? It's not just enmity just like that. There are more Pashtuns in Pakistan than there are in Afghanistan, right? And the way Pakistan sees Kashmir is the way they see the Northwest Frontier Province and North Balochistan.
That
Right.
it's ours. It should be
It's ours. It should have been part of ours. The British illegally annexed it. It should have been given back to us. It has no business being part of Pakistan. So it's also, and look, they've had very good relationships with the Iranians. They've not rocked the boat. The Taliban 1.0 rocked the boat with the Iranians. But Taliban 2.0 hasn't rocked the boat with the Iranians, right? So they get along with everyone except Pakistan. And the Iranians don't have such a good reputation there as the Indians do. With Indians, there's genuine affection. They'll give you, they're poor people. They can't give you much, but they can give you something. So, for example, sheer yak is their form of ice cream. They'll always, almost every sheer yak place I went to, they'd give me a extra scoop for being in. There'd always be something free just for being in India. Which, was very touching because, a businessman to give you something free, it has to come from the heart because he knows I'm not coming back there. So it's not like he's cultivating a repeat business, whatever.
Have you been to Iran?
Okay, so Iran is a very, very curious case. In 1979, when the Shah was deposed, Iran had a higher per capita income and was at least, or if not possibly more industrialized than Taiwan and South Korea. Okay. And then the so-called Islamic Revolution, Khomeini, happens. And that industrialization is aborted. Everything just freezes in time, right? Today, had that trajectory continued, they would have probably been ahead of South Korea and they would have been like, say, Dubai or Doha in terms of living standard. They would have been a fully developed country, very stable, possibly. I mean, it's impossible to predict. I'm going out on a limb out here. But, Khomeini's real problem wasn't that he was a religious fanatic. His real problem was he alienated every single person around him He alienated the Saudis, he alienated the Americans, he alienated the Emiratis, he alienated the Iraqis, he alienated the Russians. In the end, he was left with absolutely no friends. So, in the first few years of the Iran-Iraq war, when he was winning the war, everybody, the Russians and the Americans, who couldn't stand each other and were threatening to nuke each other, got together to supply Saddam Hussein with equipment to defeat the Iranians. And towards the end, Saddam Hussein was on the verge of crushing the Iranians when, Iran finally sued for peace. And there's that famous speech of Khomeini where he takes the poisoned chalice, so to say, and he says, "I'm going to drink from the poisoned chalice. Let this peace be on nobody except my head." And they are a society whose creativity, culture, everything have kind of been caged up. And it went from a very progressive society to there's still a very open society, incidentally. So don't believe all this, what you see in Tehran. And do you watch Tehran on Apple TV?
No.
Okay. But if you watch these stories about, how Iran is, it's certainly not the Iran that I know ever since I've been visiting Iran, right? But you can see there's a lot of, I wouldn't say fear, but they want to talk about everything except politics. They don't want to have a political conversation at all. There are lots of power factions because, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the ruling party, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, the mullahs and everything, they're so corrupt. There isn't a single mullah's son or grandson who isn't driving around in Ferraris or Lamborghinis and things like that. And because it was under sanctions for so long, what sanctions do is they create a black market. And that entire black market is controlled by the powerful people out there.
You mean in the long term? So another country will say, listen, we're not going to trade with you when it comes to this commodity.
Correct.
Therefore, it leads to some rise of that commodity within that country.
Which gets controlled by one faction within the government.
Right. Mafia,
essentially, right? There's a criminalization of government. And like you said, with all rich people, they've got their pads in Dubai and things like that. But what I did not expect was for the sudden Saudi-Iranian rapprochement to happen that has happened last month. And especially, I know why China was involved in it. It's not like the Chinese negotiated the Saudi-Iranian.
Give context here.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah. So I actually thought that, ever since Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Emiratis kissed and made up, it created this sort of triangle of iron where they're all equally focused on containing or defeating Iran. Because, like I said, Ayatollah Khomeini went out of his way to make enemies with everybody. Unnecessarily. And now, I guess what's happened is that the Saudis and, to a lesser extent, the Israelis, they're still quite worried about it. But the Emiratis find that the Biden administration is so insufferable that they'd actually rather make friends with the Iranians than follow the diktats of Biden. It shouldn't have come as a surprise. I probably overestimated the bitterness that existed between the Saudis and the Iranians. And the deal was negotiated by the Chinese. Well, it wasn't negotiated by the Chinese. Apparently, MBS just got the Chinese there to spite the Americans and say, I can do without you. And if you're not going to play by our rules, we can get the Chinese in. So it was kind of a threat to the Americans. The Israelis, very surprisingly, for them, Iran is enemy number one. And I'm not seeing panic in Israel. In my private conversations with my Israeli friends, they're like, let's see. They're non-committal. They think MBS might be able to achieve something more substantial than Biden could.
Break down this achievement, according to yourself.
So the achievement... Okay, so American achievement is Israeli-Saudi failure. What the Americans consider their 100 on 100 is for Israel and Saudi Arabia 0 on 100. And I'll give you the history of this. So Obama negotiated the Iran nuclear deal. And Saudi Arabia and Israel's big problem with the Iran nuclear deal was it wasn't a permanent deal, right? It was a 15 to 20 year period where Iran would not go nuclear. It would have safeguards on its nuclear reactors and things like that. But in return, America removed sanctions that weren't just related to nuclear weapons building. They also removed sanctions that were related to terrorism. And remember, the prime target of Iranian terrorism has been Israel and Saudi Arabia. Less Saudi Arabia, more Israel. So they were getting very upset that you're actually rewarding these guys. They've not toned down their terrorism, and you haven't even got a permanent renunciation of nuclear weapons from the Iranians. At the end of that 15, 20-year period, they're still going to have all the capacities to build nuclear weapons, but they'll also build up their economy. They'll be in a very good position to resist more sanctions if they're imposed 20 years down the line. So the Israelis and the Saudis and the Emiratis, they hated Obama. They even now in private, they use some of the most choicest abuses for Obama, which is very surprising for the Republicans because they always used to accuse him of being a Muslim. And it's quite surprising what the Israelis and especially what the Arabs use for him in private is like next level. I'm not going to repeat it here. Then came Trump. And Trump had a very different idea. The problem with, you've heard that poem, the 6 wise men of Hindustan who went to see the camel. And they all touch a different part and they think it's a totally different beast. So the problem here was that there was so much so-called expertise on how to deal with the Saudis, how to deal with Iran, how to make peace between the Arabs and the Israelis. Trump said, you're all morons. Get out of here. He cracked down on Iran. He canceled the deal because he said, look, let me first create a common enemy. You guys hate each other, but you hate the Iranians more. Let's all gang up on the Iranians and then you'll see how you two are connected to each other. And that kind of opened up a sort of diplomatic rapprochement between the Emiratis, the Saudis on the one hand, and the Israelis. And so, Trump brought about more diplomatic recognition of Israel in his 4 years than the previous 7, 8, 9 presidents had over the previous 40, 50 years.
Just by saying, listen, get together, target that enemy. It's a very classical use case from geopolitics.
Exactly.
When people are fighting together, get them together and say, listen, don't fight amongst each other, fight against that.
Yeah, and it's a very basic principle of geopolitics, right? It's almost like 2 + 2 = 4. This is not something that requires rocket science or a PhD to understand. And yet in all that sort of pseudo-scholarly, pseudo-academic discourse in DC, they had made this seem like a very complicated problem, which it was not. Right? They went on insisting the Saudis and the Emiratis will never work with the Israelis unless there's a free Palestine. And both the Saudis and the Emiratis were happy to just dump Palestine. These days, they don't even bother criticizing when Israel does something to the Palestinian territories, right?
Only girls on Instagram do.
Yeah, only girls on Instagram.
Some girls, not all girls.
And Twitter too, and Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah. And see, you keep looking at the girls. I keep looking at what the boys do. The boys don't do this, by the way. Only the girls do. What happened was, after that, after Trump loses the election, you have Biden. Now, Biden hates MBS because he thinks MBS so MBS in Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, and Mohammed bin Zayed, MBZ in UAE, gave Trump diplomatic victories that Trump did not deserve. That they supported Trump, that Trump's Iran policy, and therefore, because remember, Biden was vice president under Obama, he had a lot to do with the Iran nuclear deal, and that they torpedoed his legacy. Plus, there was the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, so which is more of it's the excuse. It's not the real reason Biden doesn't like the Emiratis and the Saudis. The Democrats in general don't like the Emiratis and the Saudis. They started poisoning the relationship with the Arabs, with their old allies, which, you don't do. But this is how bad DC has become these days. And they went on talking about how can we get the Iran nuclear deal back on track. completely ignoring what the Israelis wanted, completely ignoring what the Saudis wanted, completely ignoring what the Emiratis wanted. And, a lot of the coming together of the Emiratis, Saudis, and Israel also had to do with the fear of Trump. Because they never knew. Remember, when Trump was getting elected in 2016, he used to say the nastiest things about the Saudis and the Emiratis. He used to call them all terrorists and this and that. But when he came to power, he became their best friend. So a lot of it was Trump is unpredictable. Let's latch on to Israel. Israel knows how to work Washington, D.C., the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. Let's latch on to that. There's many things that brought those countries together, right? Now, Biden hates Netanyahu equally as he hates Mohammed bin Salman and to a lesser extent Mohammed bin Zayed. And the feeling is mutual. They hate him right back. Biden tried to change the government in Israel. There was active political interference in Israel, which then brought another prime minister. Now, of course, Netanyahu's back after the election. So they share a mutual hatred of Biden now. They share a mutual hatred of the Democrats now, largely, because this is how the Democratic Party thinks. And it just became what brought them together in reverse. Instead of Iran being the big enemy, America is the enemy, which they're not going to call the enemy, but they've all decided that not America, Biden and the Democrats are like Lord Voldemort, he who cannot be named. They refer to Biden as he who cannot.
It's like that cool kid in college who suddenly becomes uncool at some point when people realize he's an asshole.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. That's what's happening.
That's what's happening.
Iran specifically on a micro level, what's happening?
Huge economic problems. Okay. Huge social problems, because what's happened is Iran has a chronic drug problem. I have never seen drugs being consumed the way they are in Tehran and Isfahan.
Just hash or like?
No, all kinds of crap. I mean, I didn't even bother asking what the hell some of that stuff was, but it seemed like chemical. I think it was crystal. I mean, I don't know what the hell this is, because my only time I've seen crystal has been on Breaking Bad. So I don't know if that is actually what crystal looks like, but hardcore drugs and partying and all of that. Almost an aimless life amongst the elites. Because what happened was, during Khomeini's time, he asked them to produce lots of kids to feed the war. So they had a huge population explosion, lots of young people, but no jobs, because he alienated everybody. So who's going to invest in Iran? No jobs, lots of young people. They get more and more restive. They're completely disillusioned with the political system, because, in CNN, BBC, or Indian news, which copies what CNN, because they don't actually have correspondents in Tehran, they'll tell you, oh, this guy's a reformist president, and that guy's a conservative president. Khatami was a reformist. Ahmadinejad was a regressive obscurantist dick. Not true. As far as the Iranians are concerned, these are both two sides of the same coin. Because, Khatami, who was the reformist democratic president, was one of the worst executioners of Khomeini when Khomeini was in power. My first memory of Tehran, which was in 85, 86, I forget when now, but somewhere in the mid-80s, was when you came out of the old airport. It was the first roundabout outside the airport. 3 people hanging from a crane.
The f***?
Yeah. And, they don't do it the nice way we Indians do, which is, you allow the guy to drop, and so the neck snaps and the death is instantaneous. You're dead even before your brain has time to process it. They do the slow hanging method, which is they tie you to the crane and then they lift the crane up, so you're slowly choking to death. Nasty. I suspect, I didn't see it happen, but I was like, oh my God, that's the first bodies that I've seen.
How does it feel seeing bodies like that?
There was a novelty value, I guess, to it. I was very young then. I don't know how I felt, except, I know I was shocked, but I don't remember the exact. It still stayed with me, so it was clearly quite impactful. I just don't know how it impacted me at that point of time. So, it was Khatami wasn't a nice man. All these people that the Western press will tell you are reformist, pro-democracy, they were nasty pieces of shit. So, now there is actually people who want something different. And you saw that, I think, during the 2014, 15, 16, I forget when, people's uprisings against all governments, so-called reformist or conservative. What you're seeing today in terms of, the hijab removal movement, it's a mix. There is a sort of elitist element to it, but a lot of the people who are equally disillusioned with both sides are also joining. It's just impossible to tell because I've not been able to communicate with all my friends for a very long time. They're blocked. WhatsApp is blocked. Instagram is blocked. Everything is blocked. I think, and most of them have Android, so they can't even come on Apple Messenger, and Apple Messenger isn't blocked for some strange reason.
Okay.
iMessage, sorry.
We've reached that point in this episode where I ask you about World War III. How often do you get asked about World War III?
Very often. And, I keep telling people the story of Norman Angell. Do you know who Norman Angell was? So he was a guy who won the Nobel Peace Prize, one of the earliest winners of the Nobel Peace Prize. And he wrote a book in 1910 or 1911 called The Great Delusion. Or was it The Great Illusion? I forget. And he said that the world was so interconnected, war was impossible. And guess what? 2-3 years later, World War I started, right? So there's a lot today to say the world is too interconnected. You can't really have World War III, but then you never know what happens tomorrow. And I really never thought Putin was going to. I knew Putin would ultimately invade Ukraine. I did not expect it. And a lot of people, all my friends who are linked to the intelligence community in Germany, in Israel, in France, were all predicting A, this would not happen. And B, if it happened, Russia would walk over in 3-4 days. The only people who went on saying, my friends who saying, Abhijit, you're wrong, this is going to happen, were my American and British friends. And I did not take them seriously. Because, you have your own internal filters, and usually I get so much anti-Russian propaganda for them, you kind of tend to zone out. And so, how we criticize the Americans that they only listen to what they want to listen to, I guess I fell into that same trap.
Okay. As a geopolitical observer, having contacts in places like Afghanistan and Iran, specifically highlighting that region, do you think it could be the beginning of something? Things could explode from there?
No.
Or it's Russia, Ukraine, if at all?
It's Russia, Ukraine, if at all that. Even there, I don't think it's going to explode. I think what's going to happen is war fatigue is going to set in about 2-3 years. And Russia will achieve most of its objectives possibly. Or if Russia has to lose the war, then the war has to continue for about 10-15 years. And I don't want to know how many people get killed in that. Because I have way too many love interests as well in Russia and Ukraine, and not so many in Ukraine, lots of Russians. And I don't want to think about that. Iran, again, my own thing is it probably won't, because I don't think people realize the level of social control that the government has on the people out there.
Where?
In Iran. It's so pervasive. There's it's a full-on surveillance state. The local mullah in the street will keep tabs on everybody and report everybody. I've never come across a culture so averse to discussing politics as Iranians in Iran. When you meet Iranians in the city that's called Teheranopolis, which is Los Angeles, they only want to talk politics.
You mean there's a lot of Iranians in
Los
LA?
Angeles has a massive Iranian population. They want to talk politics. But in Iran, it's the moment you want to start talking politics, they're like, oh, okay, let's talk about food. Let's talk about this kebab, or let's talk about this korma, or let's talk about the latest movie that's come out.
Damn.
Yeah.
What's their perspective on India?
Indifferent. They don't really
get-
think about India. They don't have any knowledge of India. They don't care about India. Indian cultural influence there is zero. They actually look down quite a bit on India. Yeah. They genuinely think that they civilized us, possibly. I mean, they won't tell me that to my face. They're very polite people. You know, in Iran, if you want to insult somebody, if I want to say, Ranveer Allahbadia, you're the biggest fool I've ever met in my life, an Iranian will never say that to you. He'll say, Ranveer Allahbadia, you are God's shadow upon earth. You're the celestial glow of your intellect emanates everywhere. You know, this isn't studio lighting we're seeing. This is your the glow of your intellect that is, and all the time he's actually calling you an asshole, a bigger asshole, and a triple asshole and a quadruple asshole and a universal rectum. But it's sickeningly sweet, polite. That is how you insult in Iran. It's called tarof. You know, in Hindi we say tarif. Yeah. So it's called tarof. And it is the most, it's how civilized people insult each other.
They don't
And
just...
you can do it in public. You can do it in front of the kids because you're not teaching the kids bad language.
You're going, "Hey, You're
Exactly.
not going like... okay.
You're saying, you know, the sun doesn't rise in the east and sets out of the west. It actually comes out of your rectum in the mornings. And, you know, so it's like, so Iranians are, they really don't give a damn about India. Which I know Indians would love to figure somewhere there, but they have this image of them being one of the great world empires. Historically, they have, right? They were the ones who were Alexander's primary enemy. They were the ones who were Rome's primary enemy. They were the ones who were Byzantium, so the Eastern Roman Empire after Rome falls, primary enemy. They were the primary enemy of the Ottoman Empire, was the primary, well, not the Ottoman Empire so much, but, you know, they were the secondary. They don't want to accept that they were the secondary enemy of the Ottoman Empire. They prefer to think of themselves as the primary enemy of the Ottoman Empire, which is, you know, the Ottoman emperors used to call themselves the Sultan of Rum, the Roman emperor, Kaisari Rum. So for them, it was a continuation of this East versus West battle, and that they were always the guardians of the East and the defenders, kind of. They are a great empire. We're like one of those, you know, they live in Antilla and the rest of Indians live in Dharavi.
Okay.
Yeah.
So many high school analogies that come to my head when you describe it this way. You know, that kid who's like probably flunked continuously, still in 12th standard, but thinks he's the shit.
Yeah.
All right. Podcast number 2. Let's go.
Okay.
How was this one for you?
This one was great fun. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one's going to be deeper.
You know, you make talking very easy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Yeah.
You know why? It's because my light comes out of these.
That's it. How does the sun shines out of your rectum? That's it.
All right. Podcast number 2. Deeper, darker, better. With lots of light.
Yeah.
That was the episode for today. If you enjoyed this one, the next one gets darker, grittier. It's more about North Korea and China. Tell me what you thought about this one. Abhijit Iyer-Mitra is going to be back for multiple episodes. That's why, you know the drill. Give me your feedback. Tell me what else you'd like to hear me discuss with him. This was another epic episode of The Ranveer Show. Stay tuned for the sequel to this one, which is just as gritty, if not grittier. See you soon.